What if the greatest source of your suffering wasn't your past, your circumstances, or other people, but your own thinking? In Don't Believe Everything You Think, Joseph Nguyen invites us to question one of the most deeply ingrained habits of the human mind, the belief that every thought we have is true, meaningful, and worth following. From the moment we wake up, our minds are filled with stories about who we are, what went wrong, what might go wrong, and what we must do to finally feel okay. These thoughts feel convincing, they feel personal, and yet this book gently reveals a powerful truth. Thoughts are not facts, and they are not you. Nguyen doesn't ask us to fight our thoughts or replace them with positive ones. Instead, he guides us towards something far more liberating, seeing thoughts for what they are and discovering the peace that exists beneath them. According to this perspective, suffering doesn't come from life itself, but from the moment we believe our thinking without question. Through simple insights and clear language, the book shows how overthinking creates anxiety, fear, and emotional pain, and how freedom arises naturally when we stop identifying with the mind's constant noise. Peace, clarity, and joy are not things we need to chase. They appear when we step out of the mental stories that block them. This book is not about fixing yourself, because it suggests there was never anything broken to begin with. It's about remembering what remains when thinking quiets down: presence, ease, and a deep sense of inner stillness. If this message resonates with you, I invite you from the heart to join the Wiser Reads community. Subscribe to the channel, walk this journey of insight with us, and let's explore ideas that don't just inform the mind, but truly free it. The root of all suffering begins in thought. At the heart of human suffering lies a simple but often overlooked truth. Pain does not come directly from events, people, or circumstances, but from the thoughts we form about them. Life constantly presents neutral situations, yet the mind immediately interprets, judges, and labels these experiences. It is within these interpretations that suffering is created. Thoughts give meaning to what happens, but when they are unconsciously believed, they turn into emotional reactions such as fear, anxiety, regret, or anger. A single thought about the past can revive pain that no longer exists, while a thought about the future can generate stress over something that has not yet happened. In this way, the mind creates suffering across time, even when the present moment itself is calm and safe. The problem is not thinking itself, but identification with thought. When we believe that our thoughts define who we are or describe reality accurately, we become trapped inside mental stories. These stories feel personal and convincing, making suffering seem unavoidable. However, thoughts arise automatically and pass on their own. They are not commands, truths, or reflections of the self. By recognizing that thoughts are temporary mental events, a powerful shift occurs. Awareness creates space between the observer and the thought, allowing emotions to soften without effort. Suffering begins to dissolve not because life changes, but because the grip of thinking loosens. This understanding reveals that peace is not something to be achieved through control or effort. It is already present beneath thought. When we stop believing every story the mind tells, clarity emerges naturally, and suffering loses its foundation.
Why thoughts feel so real, but aren't. Thoughts feel real because the mind presents them as immediate, personal, and authoritative. They appear in our own voice, reference our memories, and predict our future, creating the illusion that they accurately describe reality. Over time, repetition strengthens this illusion. The more a thought is repeated, the more familiar it feels, and familiarity is often mistaken for truth. The mind's job is to interpret and protect, so it constantly scans for meaning and potential threats. This survival-based function gives thoughts a sense of urgency. When a thought warns of danger, failure, or rejection, the body responds with emotion, reinforcing the belief that the thought must be important. The emotional reaction makes the thought feel solid and real, even when it is only an assumption. Another reason thoughts feel real is identification. When we believe thoughts are mine and represent who we are, questioning them feels like questioning our own identity. This deep attachment makes it difficult to see thoughts objectively. Instead of observing them, we live inside them. Yet thoughts have no physical substance. They appear, change, and disappear without effort. They do not require action, belief, or resistance to pass. When observed without judgment, their temporary nature becomes clear. A thought that once felt overwhelming can fade completely when it is no longer believed. Understanding this reveals a crucial insight. Thoughts do not create reality, they create a story about reality. The feeling of realness comes from belief, not truth. When belief loosens, thoughts lose their emotional charge. Freedom arises not from controlling thoughts, but from recognizing their true nature. By seeing thoughts as mental events rather than facts, we regain clarity, emotional balance, and a deeper connection to the present moment, where reality actually exists.
The illusion of control through overthinking. Overthinking creates the illusion that more thought will lead to more control. The mind believes that by analyzing, planning, and replaying situations, it can prevent mistakes, avoid pain, and secure better outcomes. This habit feels productive and responsible, but in reality, it often deepens anxiety rather than resolving it. The desire to overthink comes from fear and uncertainty. When life feels unpredictable, the mind responds by trying to manage every possible scenario. It replays past conversations, imagines future problems, and searches endlessly for the right answer. This constant mental activity gives a temporary sense of safety, as if thinking harder will eliminate risk. Yet uncertainty remains, and the mind responds by thinking even more. Overthinking does not provide real control because it operates in imagination, not reality. It focuses on hypothetical outcomes rather than present action. Instead of clarity, it creates mental exhaustion, self-doubt, and emotional tension. The more the mind tries to control life through thought, the more trapped it becomes in worry. True control does not come from excessive thinking, but from presence. When attention returns to the present moment, decisions arise naturally and actions become simpler. Without the noise of overanalysis, intuition and clarity can emerge. Life is handled directly rather than through endless mental rehearsal. Recognizing overthinking as an illusion allows its grip to loosen. There is no need to stop thoughts forcefully. Seeing their purpose and limitation is enough. When we stop believing that thinking equals control, the mind quiets and a deeper sense of trust develops. Freedom appears not when everything is mentally planned, but when we allow life to unfold while responding from awareness. In letting go of overthinking, we discover that peace and clarity were never something to think our way into. They were already here. How identification with thought creates pain. Pain arises not simply from thoughts, but from the moment we identify with them. Identification happens when thoughts are no longer seen as passing mental events, but as accurate descriptions of who we are and what life means. When a thought says, "I'm not enough," or "something is wrong," and it is believed, it becomes personal. This belief transforms a neutral thought into emotional pain.
The mind constantly produces narratives about the self, stories about success, failure, worth, and identity. When we unconsciously merge with these stories, they shape our emotions and behavior. A single negative thought can define how we feel for hours or even days, not because the thought is true, but because it has been accepted as reality. Identification also creates a false sense of self. Instead of experiencing life directly, we experience it through mental labels and judgments. This separation from the present moment intensifies suffering, as attention becomes trapped in regret about the past or fear of the future. The more we believe these inner stories, the more real and painful they feel. Pain persists because identification hides awareness. When we are lost in thought, there is no space to observe it. But the moment a thought is noticed rather than believed, distance is created. This simple shift reveals that thoughts are not the self, they are events happening within awareness. As identification loosens, emotional pain begins to dissolve naturally. There is no need to replace negative thoughts with positive ones. Freedom comes from disidentification, not correction. When thoughts are allowed to arise and pass without ownership, their power fades. This understanding reveals a profound truth. Suffering is not caused by thoughts themselves, but by believing they define us. When we stop identifying with thought, we reconnect with a deeper sense of presence, where peace and clarity exist beyond the mind's stories. Awareness is the silent background in which all thoughts, emotions, and sensations appear. It exists prior to thinking and remains unchanged regardless of what the mind produces. While the mind is active, noisy, and constantly shifting, awareness is steady, open, and calm. Most suffering arises when attention is absorbed in thought and awareness is forgotten. Thoughts often dominate experience, creating the illusion that the mind is all there is. Yet the very ability to notice a thought proves the presence of something beyond it. That noticing presence is awareness. It does not judge, analyze, or react. It simply observes. When awareness is recognized, thoughts lose their central authority. Awareness creates space. In this space, emotions are felt without resistance, and thoughts are seen without belief. Instead of being pulled into mental stories, we witness them come and go. This witnessing naturally reduces emotional intensity, not through effort, but through clarity. What was once overwhelming becomes manageable when seen from awareness. Unlike thinking, awareness does not seek to fix or improve experience. It allows life to unfold as it is. In this allowing, a deep sense of ease emerges. Problems may still exist, but suffering decreases because there is no longer identification with the mind's interpretations. Awareness is always present, even during stress or confusion. It does not need to be created, trained, or strengthened. It is already here, waiting to be noticed. The shift is not about escaping thought, but about resting in the space that holds it. When awareness becomes the primary point of reference, life feels more grounded and alive. Peace is no longer something to achieve in the future. It is recognized as the natural state that exists beyond the mind's constant movement. Letting thoughts pass without resistance is a gentle but powerful shift in how we relate to the mind. Most suffering comes not from thoughts themselves, but from our reaction to them. Fighting unwanted thoughts, trying to replace them, or judging ourselves for having them. This resistance gives thoughts more energy and makes them linger longer than they naturally would. Thoughts are spontaneous mental events. They arise without invitation and disappear when not engaged. When we attempt to control or suppress them, we unintentionally signal that they are important or dangerous. The mind then returns to them repeatedly, creating a cycle of struggle and frustration. Non-resistance does not mean agreeing with thoughts or acting on them. It means allowing them to exist without interference. When a thought is noticed and left alone, it often fades on its own, much like a cloud passing through the sky. Attention remains present, while the thought loses its emotional charge. This approach shifts the focus from the content of thoughts to our relationship with them. Instead of asking whether a thought is true or useful, we simply observe it. In this observation, space opens and awareness takes the lead. The mind relaxes because it no longer needs to defend or correct anything. As resistance dissolves, inner tension softens, emotional reactions become less intense, and clarity arises naturally. Life feels lighter, not because thoughts have stopped, but because they no longer control experience. Letting thoughts pass without resistance reveals an important truth. Peace is found not by managing the mind, but by stepping out of the struggle with it. When we stop pushing against our thoughts, they lose their power, and a deeper sense of ease and presence becomes available in every moment.
Freedom found in non-attachment. Non-attachment is often misunderstood as indifference or emotional distance, but in truth, it is the source of deep inner freedom. It does not mean avoiding thoughts, emotions, or experiences. It means allowing them to exist without clinging to them for identity, security, or happiness. Suffering begins when we attach ourselves to outcomes, beliefs, and mental stories, believing they must remain a certain way for us to feel okay. Attachment ties our well-being to conditions that are constantly changing. When we cling to positive experiences, we fear their loss. When we resist negative ones, we create inner conflict. In both cases, the mind seeks control, and freedom is replaced by tension. Non-attachment loosens this grip, allowing life to flow without constant resistance. In relation to thought, non-attachment means not holding on to ideas as absolute truths. Thoughts about success, failure, self-worth, or the future are seen as passing interpretations rather than fixed realities. When we stop grasping at these mental narratives, emotional suffering naturally decreases. We remain open and responsive rather than reactive. Non-attachment does not remove care or engagement with life. It enhances them. Without the burden of clinging, actions become clearer and more intentional. We can fully participate in life without being emotionally trapped by its outcomes. Joy is experienced more fully, and pain passes more gently. Freedom arises when nothing needs to be defended or controlled internally. The mind relaxes, and a quiet trust in life replaces fear. In this state, peace is not dependent on circumstances, but rooted in awareness itself. By practicing non-attachment, we discover that true freedom is not found in getting or avoiding things, but in releasing the need for them to define us.
The end of seeking happiness through thinking. Seeking happiness through thinking is one of the mind's most persistent habits. We are conditioned to believe that happiness will come once we figure everything out, when we solve our problems, fix ourselves, or reach a certain understanding. The mind promises that the right thought, plan, or insight will finally bring lasting peace. Yet this search rarely ends because thinking itself is endless. Happiness cannot be sustained through thought because thoughts operate in time. They are always pointing to the future or replaying the past. When happiness is pursued through thinking, it is postponed, placed somewhere ahead of the present moment. Even when goals are achieved, the mind quickly creates new conditions, restarting the search. This cycle keeps fulfillment just out of reach. Thinking also turns happiness into a concept rather than a lived experience. Instead of feeling ease or contentment, we evaluate whether we are happy enough. This self-monitoring creates tension and dissatisfaction, blocking the very peace we are seeking. The more the mind tries to manufacture happiness, the more artificial and fragile it becomes. The end of seeking does not come from better strategies or more positive thinking. It comes from recognizing the limitation of thought itself. Happiness is not something the mind can produce. It is something that naturally arises when mental striving stops. When attention settles into the present moment without chasing or resisting, a quiet sense of well-being emerges. This peace is not dramatic or dependent on circumstances. It is simple, stable, and already available. Letting go of the search through thinking does not mean giving up on life. It means living more directly, responding to life as it is. In this surrender, happiness is no longer pursued. It is discovered as the natural state beneath thought.
Living from presence instead of the mind. Living from presence means experiencing life directly, rather than through the constant commentary of the mind. Most of the time, attention is absorbed in thoughts, planning, judging, remembering, or worrying. While thinking is useful, living exclusively from the mind disconnects us from the richness of the present moment and creates unnecessary suffering. The mind tends to operate in stories. It filters reality through past experiences and future expectations, often reacting to what it imagines rather than what is actually happening. When life is lived from this mental space, emotions are driven by fear, regret, or anticipation. Presence offers an alternative, meeting each moment as it is, without interpretation. Presence is not the absence of thought, but the awareness that holds it. When attention rests in presence, thoughts still arise, but they no longer dominate experience. Actions become simpler and more natural, guided by clarity rather than over-analysis. Decisions feel intuitive instead of forced because they emerge from direct perception. Living from presence deepens connection with ourselves, others, and life itself. Conversations become more genuine, experiences more vivid, and challenges less overwhelming. Without constant mental resistance, emotions move through more freely, and inner tension softens. This way of living does not require effort or special conditions. Presence is always available, even in ordinary moments. It is found by noticing what is already here, the breath, the body, the sounds around us. In this noticing, the mind relaxes. When presence becomes the primary reference point, life feels more grounded and alive. Peace is no longer dependent on circumstances or mental control. By living from presence instead of the mind, we rediscover a natural state of ease, clarity, and quiet joy that has always been within reach. Conclusion. Peace begins when you stop believing every thought. Peace does not arrive through perfect thinking, self-improvement, or control over life's circumstances. It begins with a simple yet profound realization. Not every thought deserves belief. Thoughts arise automatically, shaped by past experiences, conditioning, and fear, but they do not define reality or the self. When they're unquestioned, they create emotional pain. When they're seen clearly, they lose their power. Believing every thought turns the mind into an authority, even when it speaks in doubt, worry, or self-criticism. This blind trust keeps attention trapped in mental stories about the past and future, separating us from the calm of the present moment. Suffering continues not because thoughts exist, but because they're mistaken for truth. Peace emerges through awareness.
By noticing thoughts instead of identifying with them, space is created. In this space, emotions soften, reactions slow, and clarity naturally appears. There is no need to fight the mind or replace negative thoughts with positive ones. Simply seeing thoughts for what they are, temporary mental events, is enough to dissolve their grip. As belief in thought loosens, a deeper intelligence becomes available. Actions feel more natural, responses more balanced, and life less heavy. Challenges may still arise, but they're met with presence rather than resistance. The inner struggle fades, replaced by acceptance and trust. This understanding reveals that peace has always been present, hidden beneath layers of thinking. It is not something to be achieved, but something to be recognized. When we stop believing every thought, we return to what is real, stable, and unchanging. In the end, freedom is not found by changing thoughts, but by no longer being ruled by them. Peace begins the moment we see that we are more than the mind, and always have been.
Listening to Don't Believe Everything You Think is less like finishing a book and more like gently waking up from a long mental habit. As the final words settle, one truth becomes clear. Suffering was never as solid or permanent as it felt. It was built moment by moment from thoughts that were believed without question. Throughout this journey, the book reminds us that thoughts are not enemies, but they are also not authorities. Anxiety, fear, self-doubt, and inner conflict do not come from life itself, but from identifying with mental stories about life. When we stop trying to control, fix, or escape our thoughts, something unexpected happens. The mind softens, and peace begins to surface naturally. The most powerful message of this book is its simplicity. You do not need to become someone new, achieve a higher state, or think more positively to find peace. Nothing is missing. Awareness is already here, quietly observing every thought, emotion, and experience. And within that awareness, there is space, clarity, and freedom. As the need to seek happiness through thinking falls away, life is felt more directly. Presence replaces overanalysis. Acceptance replaces struggle. And peace is no longer something promised in the future, it becomes something recognized in the now. If this book resonated with you, take a moment to let its message settle into your own life. And if you felt even a small sense of calm, clarity, or relief while listening, I invite you, truly from the heart, to join the Wiser Reads channel. Subscribe, stay with us, and walk this path of insight together. Because sometimes, one quiet realization can change the way you experience everything.